5 to 10 years before the 1900, there was a series of conferences about horse manure. So, and I believe they were held, in London, Berlin, like big capitals.
Talk about a bullshit job.
Isn't it?
Welcome to the Let Me Save You 25 Years podcast. I am your host, Shawn David Nelson, aka the Love Sack Guy. Have you ever put so much thought into some endeavor, effort, only to find out that nobody cared anyway? Maybe it was as simple as something you were going to wear. Maybe it was something you were composing or inventing. And then it turns out nobody even cared. That is kind of the meaning behind today's Shawnism. Nothing really matters. Now, of course, there's plenty in life that does matter, but we're going to explore this topic in great depth with an amazing guest, just to build on this idea from personal experience where it comes from. I really felt this deeply for the first time after spending a year of my life working in Shanghai, China. I was 23 years old, fluent in Mandarin Chinese from having served a mission for my church earlier. Got this job offer through my university to take a break from school and go become an intern and a management training consultant in Shanghai, China. My clients were McDonald's, Roche, Siemens, Whirlpool, Honeywell, Medtronic. I'm leading team building, leadership, presentation skills courses in Mandarin to high-level executives at these big Fortune 500 companies in China. At 23 years old. At nights, because I wasn't really into dating then, I was kind of I won't get into that while I'm over here in China. I'm just gonna do my own thing. I ended up playing the piano and singing in bars in downtown Shanghai 6 nights a week, 2 times Thursdays and Fridays in different clubs. Eventually that turned into a cover band. I'm making friends. I have a whole network. I'm out every night. And then I'm working with the biggest companies in Shanghai during the days, traveling to remote locations to do these, 3-day training seminars in the coolest places in China. I am leaving my stamp on Shanghai. And then I go home. The internship ends. I got to finish school. They've invited me back to take a full-time job. Lovesack is starting to go. I have to make a decision when I get home. Do I stay with Lovesack and build it, or do I come back 6 months later after I'm done with school and, become their head trainer at this consultancy? Because I was that good on stage at a young age. And in fact, I get the chance to do both. Lovesack's kind of going, but they need me back for one more consulting gig 6 months later, right as school's wrapping up. And I'm going to then use that to make my decision. And as I go back to Shanghai, everyone's gone. They've moved on. I've got no one to reach out to. It's crazy how fast that city forgot me. Here I was thinking I'm kind of like the man. I've got all these friends in Shanghai. And there were a few of them still doing their thing, but they were busy. They didn't have time to see me. I did my consulting gig, and I just realized this city has been here for hundreds of years. It's been occupied by the French, occupied by the British. It's the Russians marched through, the Chinese took it back after the Opium Wars. Who am I to think I even matter to this nameless, faceless place called Shanghai? And I realized for all of my pomp and circumstance and qualifications and friends and connections, nothing I do in that realm really even matters. And we're going to talk about that at great length with today's guest, who is someone who has spent their career helping leaders rethink not just how they show up, but why they show up. He's a professor, author, leadership expert himself, and one of the most thought-provoking minds in business today. This man has taught at Harvard, Columbia, NYU. He's built and sold companies and interviewed hundreds of CEOs, all in pursuit of understanding what really drives human potential. Today, he is here to help us unpack this Shawnism that's going to hit a little different. Nothing really matters. Does that sound dark? It's not meant to be. It's freeing, because when we stop believing the lie that everyone is watching our every move, that anyone even gives a crap, that we finally gives ourselves permission to be bold, to take risks and stop playing small. Please welcome the relentlessly curious, refreshingly honest, and always insightful Alexander Puutio.
Hey, thank you, Shawn. And I love how you built it up to being like this hopeful note of a concept, isn't it? Like
Isn't
that,
it?
yeah, that's how I then and so your team gave a big list, and it didn't take me more than half a second. It was like, oh, nothing mattered. Like that's it. So a lot of people do take it as this terminal state of affairs.
Right.
Nothing matters. Why wake up in the morning?
Yes.
Nothing matters. Let's wake up in the morning.
Yes.
Let's build a thing. Let's create a company.
No one even cares really. So
Yes.
like everything is possible.
Exactly.
It's the opposite of being fatalistic or suicidal. So in fact, when you first heard this Shawnism, first thing that came to your mind without thinking too hard?
Metallica, because I
All right.
right. I think there's a song very close by, and my father used to rock it, and then I inherited the Chevy van, a 1989 6.2 liter Chevy, and it was it was stuck in the. If you remember, there was these kind of CD changers that used to have 10 CDs.
Absolutely.
So CD number 2 you couldn't swipe out.
Yes.
So Dad's Metallica was there. And so nothing mattered. Love the album for many reasons. I think there was the Eagles record, Hell Freezes Over, stuck too. So that kind of did something to my music taste.
Good CDs to be stuck on.
Isn't it? Yeah. And then so that was the first thing. But the second was really how, well, first of all, like unorthodox thinking, to my view, is a skill everyone should flex a little bit more. Like pushing, like not just the lateral thinking, where you're think outside the box, like think of no box whatsoever. Like let's figure out what is the box to build to begin with. So this idea of like nothing matters, I think that forces us to build the box in many ways. In business, it forces you to explain, like Lovesac, does it matter? Right? Well, to whom does it matter? There are more people who don't know it. There's if you look at human race, from the first human to the last human, there will always be more people to whom Lovesac never existed. Yeah. Or any company, whatever company it is.
Disney,
Apple, whatever. Warren Buffett, like the gods of art. Rockefeller, right? So some of my students, I tell them, look, like you are now wealthier than Rockefeller, right? That ticket was punched. It's done.
Isn't that
like you get cooked. Like it's over. One ride, and then where you go, that's another conversation.
Expound that for anyone didn't grab it. How are they wealthier than Rockefeller?
Because they're not alive anymore. The dumbest way. It is the dumbest thing. Yeah. Right. But also the dumbest things, the most naive, simplest things if you really expand on it the right way, and you don't always need ayahuasca or something to expand it, you can really see how it does release you. Yeah. Like, and so in this, like nothing, like what matters in the end. Right. And there's a wonderful study, the Harvard longitudinal study, if you've heard of this, The Good Life is the book. I wish I could remember the authors or the full name of the study. And so you look at towards the end of life, what do people regret the most? Yeah. Right. What do people feel like they lost on? What they wish they would have done? What mattered? And surprise, human centric everything. Which is what attracts me to the brand and to our conversation in many ways, like the centering of the human. And so the people who have the least regrets, if you really kind of paint with a broad stroke, spent a lot of time with kick-ass humans, doing things on their own terms, right? And so then what matters is usually nothing that others think matter, in that sense. Right? Like what your boss thinks matters usually doesn't matter to you anymore when you're 85 and you're kind of looking at the book of life.
I didn't think about that. We could get esoteric or semantic and pick it apart. No thing
correct. Yes.
Really matters.
Yeah. No thing matters. Yeah.
No thing really matters.
It is dust.
Everything else is dust, as we say, right? The Shawnism. So
correct.
Yes, that's good. And by the way, when I say everything else is dust, the other things that I'm obviously referring to are my wife, my kids, my relationships.
Yeah.
That's the only part that's not dust.
Yeah.
So nothing really matters as a freeing agent. That's so interesting to think about this notion that we're wealthier than Rockefeller. Rockefeller was probably the wealthiest person to ever live on the earth on a comparative basis. If you do, right? If you normalize for today's dollars and everything else. Yeah. It reminds me of something my grandma said to me once. I asked my grandmother. My grandmother lived to be in her 90s, sorry. And it struck me that she would tell me stories when she was dating my grandfather of, going on dates in the horse and buggy.
Yeah.
Of course, cars were around, but like they still lived in a society where they had horses and buggies and they could take them for fun at least. Yeah. And so I asked, and by the way, before her death, she could have had an iPhone in her pocket with GPS, everything, right? So I asked her, I said, Grandma, I said, what is the most impactful invention in your life?
Yeah.
Because she's seen a lot. And she thought about it for a minute. And you know what she said to me? Indoor plumbing.
There we go. There we go.
That puts something in perspective.
Matters.
That matters. That is life-changing.
Well,
so here we were so like in awe of our iPhone and all the apps. Yes. But to be honest with you, if I could somehow shape society and pull all the strings, I think I would be perfectly happy to have stopped the progression of the digital revolution around 1999.
Yeah.
I had a flip phone. I could text all my friends. We could wrangle, get together, not be lost if we were trying to meet up.
Yeah. But
texting was a little difficult. You had to do like the triple click, one letter at a time. But at least I could do it. And that flip phone is as consuming as texting could be in its exciting way, with girls at the time or with friends or whatever. It didn't consume me the way that a screen can consume me today.
Yeah.
Or my children.
Yeah.
Yet we had that convenience at least of, not being lost without a quarter and a payphone.
Exactly.
I kind of wish we could keep it there.
Fewer things matter.
Yeah.
Right. So, but isn't that almost, if you look at history, and so all the way to the very first writings about society, like let's go back to Aristotle and all of these, you'll find authors vehemently attacking the youth. Right? It's one of my favorite topics. Like this is, we're harping on like
kids these days,
isn't it? And that's writing. So I'm sure someone was bitching about the youth before writing, before we ever stuck like a reed to anything, to charcoal. And so like this idea of like, all right, where do you stop this? It was the horse and buggy was an invention, right?
Yeah.
So like, is there someone like your cows are getting like you're no longer getting the exercise. You're half a human because the horses do the work for you. Yeah. Domesticating those dumb beasts is the stupidest thing that young generation ever did.
Well, here we are running right into the same fire now with AI and robots.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
I mean, these same debates. And it's funny because every time I catch myself lamenting the state of our flippin' society, political, financial,
the planet,
the climate, the world, civilizations, the youth and their screen time. I just wonder if it's always been the same. And I'm just another one complainer saying, kids these days.
Yeah. It comes to all of us.
Yeah. I don't know where we are on that continuum yet. I love that analogy of the horse and buggy. We're about to face the same master revolution with robots.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
I view it.
You welcome the robot overlords?
Well, I look, I'm just being very pragmatic in the sense that it matters to me. So Lovesac has a chance to be the most sustainable product company on the planet, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And the way we get there, fundamentally, as I've explained to you in other friendly conversations, is to create demand for sameness.
Yeah.
In other words, create enough value in people buying into this platform with the notion that, hey, I can add to this thing later. But the only way that's true is if it doesn't change versus like the rest of like fashion, furniture, pick the category, trends, appliances, even kitchen counters, white's already out of style. You know what I mean? It's just constantly churning. And that's a construct created by humans to frankly just make more money.
Yeah.
Just to make more money,
yeah.
Period. Yet here I am trying to get you to buy into a platform that can't change if you want it to do what the platform does, which is be available to you in 5 years to add to, or as we develop the recliner to add that, or as we develop new covers to add that, right? And change them out. So it's demand for sameness, which then allows me to achieve tremendous volume, which then allows me to utilize robots to manufacture these things closer to you, because American labor is just too expensive. It always will be for a lot of these categories. But the robots give me a path. But without the volume, I can't have that path. And without this fundamental design for life notion, I don't think I can get the volume. Because there's too much changeover in most modern factories. Therefore, I see a path with these robots for me selfishly and my business that I think is really great, not only for my business, but of course for humankind, because there will be fewer couches sold on earth because I mess with couches. And that's my whole vision. So for me, my point is this robot revolution that's coming, I can't wait for it. On the other hand, then you say, well, what about all the people?
Indeed.
Now,
how about our kids? We need to find something for them.
So let me go to the micro before we get, because I can't speak to the macro yet. But at least, again, back to the love sack analogy. I would love your kids or my kids or the kids in Vietnam, whose parents currently manufacture Sactionals with their fingers, to be able to work in an air-conditioned love sack showroom in Vietnam, selling our amazing products that were hopefully made either by their parents or by robots down the street, shipped over shorter distances, using more sustainable inputs than having to necessarily go work in those factories themselves. So I think there's still opportunity for people to, just once again, just like the horse and buggy, the jobs will shift. The jobs will shift.
I love that. So that reminds me of two things. First, like there's a thing in the human mind, a bit of an affliction, which I think we could call kind of a conversation, the kind of the museum curator bias, where we look at a thing as it is today or as it was in the past. The number of languages is a good one, right? So that it doesn't piss me off, but it does set an irrational trigger in my head. Whenever someone says, we need to safeguard language XYZ, right? And it's like, okay, so a museum curator will say that, right? Because in 2025, we had these 5,000 languages. And in the coming 10 years, we might only have 4,500. And so we need to safeguard this diversity that is intrinsically valuable on its own. I think I agree with fully capturing the diversity and cherishing the diversity. And if not, almost like finding a way of forever showing that these are the languages we spoke. Like Finnish, like it's one of those languages, well, it's getting mixed with a lot of stuff. It's changed a lot from what we know where it came from. And give it a couple of thousand years, who speaks it?
By the way, all Chinese people at this point that have any level of education speak English.
Correct. So that exactly the Babel Tower. We can go into wonderful tangents on this. But so this idea then let's freeze things as they are to conserve it. That I oppose, right? So the cherishing I agree with. Let's make sure that the Mari people is one. So connected to the Finnish language. So our kids 5, 3, and 1. Like I recently came to understand I can't tell them anything about Finnishness beyond the surface, right? Like ice hockey and all of this, like the basic stuff, like the bub trivia stuff. Like where the hell did we come from? Like what is the language? Where's the gene pool? Like the haplo, like the things that you're carrying, like the father lineage, the Y that you're carrying. Where the hell does that come from? Who are those people? What did they believe in? You know what? We lost all of it in Finland. So the colonialism 1,000 years ago.
Does it matter?
Exactly. So that's the thing. How does it? So you're anticipating the pull here. But so like this idea of like, I want to conserve the idea, the concept, the language. I want to see what the Mari people speak today so I can inform myself of what Finnish beliefs, what were our gods called? The fascinating question to me, right? Like and most likely it looks like we had fathers and mothers for a lot of stuff, like the father of the river, the father of this bigger lake, the father, and we still kind of have some of those, father, mother things, and nature had like spirits and all of this. But do I want to conserve that from 1,500 years ago and say, let's forever have this belief? Of course not. Do I want to conserve 5,000 languages if it seems like Finns, the Chinese, everyone else is coalescing through a very natural emergent process into English? I don't want to stop it. But so this idea of then like what jobs are to be conserved, right? So I think like that first sets off a bit of a trigger in me. Is like, who are you to tell someone who's doing what they might themselves call a bullshit job? One of the best books on this topic, right? Titled Bullshit Jobs, where you ask people like, all right, so what you're doing? And I've done procurement in my life. So like, getting 15 signatures on a thing doesn't matter as much. You could have done with 1 or 0. And so this like, what are we even conserving? Does it require conserving? Have we really thoughtfully thought out, or are we just maybe resistant to change and scared of stuff? And there are obviously a lot of stuff that deteriorates with change. So that's one. I do get that. But I said, like, quite often our mind gets captured with this, like just like a museum curator. Like, look, I like, and specifically when we have a lot of empathy, so when we're looking from our pedestal downwards to the marginal, to the periphery, to the less fortunate, let's conserve it, right? But if you conserve a thing that's naturally progressing to something different, so for example, the workplace, so which one is a better factory, where you have kids age 8 to 12 working on couches, or where robots do it? Which one would you want for your children?
Well, first of all, we don't have kids 8 to 12 working in factories.
Correct. That was
but
there was a factory like that 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And if you look at the Slater Mill, like the first factory in the US, 1796, whatever, close enough. Right. So like, would you want to conserve those jobs? Okay. Right. So I think it requires us to first have like this line by line, very careful consideration of like what. And then the second is, the more I've talked to people who actually are pushing AI as far as they can, right? So there's the centrality of humans is so obvious. So I wrote something for Forbes recently about human after all. Like I just woke up one, I was like, no, like that's it, human after all. I'm sure if that's sounds like a Daft Punk album, but like that is it. Like, so AI does the drudgery, AI does the robotic stuff we never wanted to do. Robots do the couches, humans do the sales, humans do the humans, right? And so thankfully it is, then combined a little bit with the demographic cliff. So, we're kind of offsetting a little bit of that otherwise negative pressure there. And I'm not at all I don't want to gloss over the horrors of losing jobs and employment in entire industries. But so for my students, the slide I have for them is from let's say 95, somewhere there, like very close by. One thing that doesn't matter is exact years. So I export that.
Don't worry about it, right?
But so
all these quizzes we used to take on, when was the war?
Let me say, so 5 to 10 years before the 1900, there was a series of conferences about horse manure. So, and I believe they were held, in London, Berlin, like big capitals.
Talk about a bullshit job,
isn't it? And so one of them was in New York, right? So I flashed that newspaper clipping to my students. I was like, all right, so take a seat. Listen, this was like of utmost concern for people here on Manhattan, on Work Island. People were sitting here, wringing hands. Like, how do we
wading through
shit? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the biggest concern of the time was just like, we're gonna drown in it. And then what does Henry Ford do? Right? Obviate the problem. Like, ding, like you're an idiot. Like 10 years later, you're an idiot if you are concerned about horseshit. Like that is, and so we quite often don't see things that are coming, obviously, because if innovation worked that way, it wouldn't be innovation. So, but I'm incurable optimist in that sense, that I said the centrality of humans, we will find a way of making that work for us.
Yeah, not only that, but it seems from my casual observation of history that every time we've gone through these major technological revolutions and eliminated some kind of nuisance, whether it's, the horses and everything that came along with that, to automobiles to, let's say, electric automobiles, and all the pollution that might someday change as that revolution takes hold. And with it, all the jobs. Like, I don't see a lot of people at Tesla dealerships.
Yeah.
I have friends that work at Ford and Chevy dealerships.
Yeah.
So I don't see anyone up in arms of that. My point is, somehow we find a way. Somehow we find a way to reallocate all of these people who want to work. That's a different problem. Like, people who just don't want to work into new opportunities.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what they are. And in fact, I'm curious. It's been a hankering of mine. Like, I mean, I've heard vague, into the services industries and into whatever. And I think that's fair. Like, but you're a guy who's exposed to all kinds of thinking. You get to read lots more books than even I do. And I love to keep learning. What do you see? Where do you see, as Lovesac, for instance, spins up an automated factory, which I think we will. Where do you see those people moving to?
Yeah. I think the first acknowledgement we have to make just from history, right? So like just from like the dumbest concept of probability, like how have the dominoes fallen in the past, doesn't tell you much about the next domino, but it tells you a little bit about gravity, right? That things will fall. So things will fall, right? Like it will get solved more or less like that. And I'm a bit of an optimist, so you can, throw a lot of salt at this and take it with it. But I don't see that problem not getting solved somehow. I just don't see like unemployment rates of 30 and 40 persisting just because like people like you, the one biggest benefit of talking to entrepreneurs, CEOs, and I love founder CEOs. I say yes almost every single time, as long as it's not Bitcoin or like alcohol. I say yes.
I would love to talk to the founder of Bitcoin.
Oh,
what are you talking about?
You do it 20 times. And nothing against Bitcoin founders, but there's the stories.
You mean crypto founders?
There you go. Right, exactly. Crypto bros. I've had my fill. But so the founder CEOs specifically, like the story of like there's a iced tea company that gets started because two friends are throwing hoops and one of them just made iced tea and they like it and then they make a brand out of it. And how did RX Bar come out? And same thing, like a couple of guys spending time human to human, having a product, liking the product, finding meaning with each other, building it, doing it. And at that time, like, were they not constructively unemployed in the moment they were doing this? And time and time after again, a couple makes this beautiful play toy for kids, that you can make music with. My kids absolutely love it, and just had a chance to talk to the couple. Both of them gainfully employed elsewhere, and yet it feels like they were kind of meaningfully employed only after, or at least their eyes light up when you talk to them. When they start talking about that chapter, same thing like when we start talking about Lovesac versus all of it before. And there's this, so like even if you look at entrepreneurs, there are thousands of people every year find their way. And they're already employed, but they might be a bullshit job.
Yeah.
They might think of it as a bullshit job, or they might not, but they find something better for themselves. And so that again, I am going to be a bit biased because there's survivorship bias. Obviously, I don't talk to people who failed as often. Like those don't get surfaced. So yes, there's more people who fail in business. So obviously that's it. But the positive side is very positive. And the ability of a human to make something good out of nothing. So in this kind of no thing matters is that, okay, it doesn't matter if there's nothing, right? It could be the dark canvas of the chasm with nothing. You bring enough humans of it, and one of them will say, well, I'm just going to paint a big, whatever it is. I'm going to just build a bridge based on what, like, we're built for that. So
I love that. And I think as you're speaking, I thought of a very prescient analogy that I think we're all witnessing in real time. So when I started Lovesac in the early 2000s, I got to start interfacing with all kinds of different agencies of various kinds, ad agencies, PR agencies, advertisers. And that whole world has undergone an enormous revolution, even just in my personal lived experience as social media has been created, which I witnessed. You know what I mean? Like there was a minute where MySpace was here.
Yeah.
And then there was a minute where Facebook became like the thing. And then Instagram overtook that, and TikTok overtook that. Or now they're all running in parallel. And all of a sudden these agency people, and they're still out there. There's the agencies who help us create stuff. There's the agencies who want us, sell us advertising. And then there's the agencies who, help us with our web business and everything else. There's agencies who help us spin up new creative concepts like at retail, and we'll still utilize them. Yeah. But I used to know a lot of people in that world because I interfaced with them.
Yeah.
And a lot of their jobs have shrunken. And a lot of that revenue in advertising broadly has gone to just people.
Yeah.
Individuals in their bedrooms making goofy dance reels and running ads before they're, the Mr. Beasts of the world. Now, Mr. Beast is the extreme case.
I know.
But there are a million little Mr. Beasts making little bits of money here and there. And in some cases, tremendous bits of money. I have friends who are millionaires. They make more money than I do or ever have, with my $700 million company.
Yeah.
But they're making more personally because it's their one person shows.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what a YouTube creator can make. And you go to, by the way, I speak at my kids' schools and whatnot on whatever career day.
Yeah.
And you ask these kids what they want to be, and half of them want to be influencers,
Yeah.
whatever that means,
Who can
or
blame them?
content creators.
Yeah.
Well, guess what?
Yeah.
15 years ago, that did not exist.
Correct.
I mean, it literally didn't exist. And now it's spread across millions of people. What used to be concentrated, at Ogilvy and Mathers, you know what I'm saying? Like at the big agencies. And so the big agencies, many of them still exist, but they are now sharing all of that revenue with all of these individuals. How cool is that?
So that triggers a couple of thoughts. And first, kind of summarize, if I could, what you're pointing to, which I think is a very astute point. This idea of technology progressing, the world evolving, things getting more complicated. On one hand, what we've seen happen time and time again, when there's a big disruption, there's also oftentimes a redistribution. Sometimes it's a redistribution. You look at the Soviet Union, collapsing. Like it wasn't the democratic redistribution, but it was a redistribution. It was an oligarchic redistribution. It was a grab. And so the Mr. Beasts are much more demographic, kind of demographically spread out distribution of the attention economy, right? This, what Galbraith, blasted us on the 60s.
By the way, just when you think everything is going big institution, and it has, all of a sudden it's redistributed to crazy amounts of individuals. Just when you think the robot corporations. So we're facing that now, right? We all think probably AI is going to take over the world. Well, guess what? It's possible that it will, and then find its way to complete redistribution again, like you're describing.
Exactly. So I think that is the first point we have to keep in mind. And the second is complexity begs for simplicity. And so if things aren't getting incredibly complex right now, for a CEO, for you, like AI adoption. So where I'm seeing most pull
what am I supposed to do with it?
Exactly. So you know what? Here comes, person A and says, well, I've fixed it for you, right? And I am the human interface for fixing that complexity for you. I will absorb the complexity. I will become AI itself. I'm a cyborg, right? You don't have to. And so if you look at the big agencies, what are they also doing? They're embracing niches. And if they are adapting at all, they are becoming more, and BCG, a good example of this, like what makes most of their revenue growth is in AI, right? And again, a thing that they couldn't have imagined 10, 15 years ago. It's not that AI didn't exist. Sagan,
they were probably wondering themselves, like, crap, it's shifting.
I'm not sure if they figured it out. In fact, I'll go and eat their lunch with my company one day. But so that's I think those two things, like the distribution is, we can't anticipate how it happens. Quite like you need to be Nostradamus to know. Like this is like in 10 years, this is going to be in the sofa industry or in X industry, whatever it is, that this is going to be distribution. Incredibly hard to make those guesses. But you should expect some type of juggling. And you'll see this even in like the biggest monolith, Google. Right? Like there has been trembling in their offices, I imagine, with AI. Because like, Matt, what is ChatGPT really doing? Is giving us the search we wanted when you had Alta Vista or Ask Jeeves, right? And so you see now Google having to, in their prompts, put AI in, right? Which, so, and on one hand, they've given us too easy of a path to information. I said, I remember no numbers anymore. Like I have to tank them up really, because everything exported into an external database that they run at the cost of ads. Right. And so like that complexity itself, the SEO optimization industry. Try to explain that to Slater, who put the mill in Pawtucket, right? How do you explain it? So here's
how do you even explain to someone 50 years ago what that is or why it even matters?
Why would you pay for it? Why would you pay $1 million for someone to crack SEO? And you'd never pay that to an individual on the factory floor.
So to that end, it begs the question, does the outcome that will unfold even matter? And what I mean by that is, to Sutter, to your point, it certainly didn't matter. Had a great career, probably did all kinds of great things, employed a lot of people. Lovesac's employing a bunch of people, doing a bunch of things. And so I think sometimes we can spend even this conversation pontificating about the future. Does the future even matter? We just said nothing really matters.
No. And so I'll go back to what I mentioned to you in our earlier chats before. Like one of the ways I sometimes start with my undergrads is telling them about the impending heat death of the universe. Because I know you're into quantum.
The impending heat death of the universe. All right. Unpack that for everyone.
Okay. So it is as simple as, everything will just go to dust. Like it truly will, Like, so that is the best hypothesis. I mean, best. Like, it is the going hypothesis. I just a couple of weeks ago saw it being refuted gently. So it looked like I am not an astrophysicist, but I dabble as much as my little brain gives me power to.
Got it.
And so the heat death of the universe, entropy will take over. We will go into the most likely arrangements of these atoms. So the two of us being arranged this way, me from Finland, you from Utah, it's quite unlikely.
Yeah.
And we are stardust,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Right. Like if you really look at where we come from, we
only
are like,
atoms. Yeah.
right. Like and it's from the first Big Bang. Like it's like, how exciting is that? Like you can really trace like all the small elements that are in us. You can trace it to like supernova, some of them, like actual stars exploding back in the day. And we are that's the only way that those more weightier elements got created, and they're in us. And so we're an incredibly unlikely arrangement.
Wildly complex.
Correct. And so nature, one thing that it doesn't like is sustaining complexity because it requires work. Work requires energy, and there's not infinite energy, right? So then this will kind of segue us perhaps at some point to sustainability. But energy will run out at some point. The sun will shut down. All of these things that are free energy for labor, unorganized, unspent energy that you can use to run a pump or feed us, whatever it is, it will just run out at some point. And then becomes the darkness, and so things start disintegrating. And then the last, I said the going hypothesis.
And crashing into each other.
Exactly. Get bits and pieces, and it will just be vibrations on the quantum field, right? So like at some point, every atom decays, as like some will decay much faster, like uranium. Like you can see the half-life, you can see it visually.
So your point, even at the atomic level,
nothing is left.
It decays.
Nothing is left.
Yeah.
So I said like, and I know this resonates with our previous conversations because truly like that is the end goal. The eternity is coming in that sense, right? Like that is the physical eternity will be, based on the best approximation understanding smarter people have of this is essentially this fluctuation of the few fields we have and perhaps a little bit of gravity action, if that. And so that's where the world is going.
Okay.
So what the hell does matter, right?
You know what's cool about this? So Alex and I just did a podcast. We just recorded his podcast a little while ago where we talked about all kinds of things. And it ended up getting, at least on my end, religious because I sometimes can't avoid it because it's a big part of me. And it's so interesting to think that from a purely, let's just call it whatever, scientific point of view, you get to this place where nothing matters because it all just ends up as a quantum vibration and even the atoms didn't matter. And if you choose to take what I would call the polar opposite point of view and you go full God, full meaning, full eternity, you're still back to eternity.
Yeah.
Only with or without the matter, you have a spiritual existence that has a point of view, that has meaning, and it still puts you to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
Like, who cares?
Yes.
Like, and I don't mean to sound insensitive. There are wars, there are difficulties, there are even just personal tragedies on both the macro and the micro level that we wrangle with in this existence. But once you stretch it out to an eternal perspective, whether you go full cold science,
correct,
or full warm God,
embrace,
you end up at the same place.
You're
and
right.
These things that we get hung up on, and so that's really the spirit of the topic. Is like once you, as a person, can, whether you choose the scientific route or the religious route or some other route, can arrive at the place where you can convince yourself that nothing really matters. I guess you could let yourself go dark and be suicidal, or ideally it can just free you.
It can.
To write your music, sing your song, do your thing, raise your kids how you want, like celebrate your life, live your life, create a company, don't create a company.
Correct.
Be a weekend warrior, but because no one's watching you, nobody really cares. We all think they are because we're posting on Instagram. I put my whole life out there. We think everyone cares about everything. And occasionally people comment or like or whatever, and it gives a little hit of dopamine.
Yeah.
But in the end, man, even they don't care. They don't really care. You know what I mean? Like, look at Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
King of pop.
Correct.
Gone.
Yeah.
Look at Steve Jobs. Gone. And look, he came up in this conversation, but I don't think about him that much.
Yeah.
I probably think about him more than I think about someone I've never met.
Yeah. that reminds me of a really powerful concept I heard from someone I wish I could remember and attribute it to. The last recall, right? So all of us have it.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
The last time anyone will say Shawn D. Nelson.
Okay.
Right? That it is coming. It's inevitable. Right? It won't be your children, their children will say your name. Their children will say your name. Their children might not.
And by the way, even if they did,
what is it?
Like you work at Harvard. I think about this a lot. I was just on the campus of Princeton yesterday.
Yeah.
All those buildings are named after someone. There they are, living on forever.
Correct.
It has no bearing.
Correct.
On my life whatsoever.
Correct.
The stones and the masonry has more bearing to me as art, at least, than the name of that thing.
Yeah. And then the term recall, right? So you go into X Hall, right? You go into Leonard Stern, NYU, right? And so, you have...
by the way, I know NYU. I worked across the street. I worked down the street at the New School. I don't know who Leonard Stern is.
Yeah. There's a picture if you go through the right hall.
Do you know what I'm saying, though?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. So the recall is the active term here.
But and I've heard his name.
Yeah,
I don't know who it is.
And what does it mean, like to be recalled? Who does the recalling? And so your earlier point, like that, we could stick on this forever. Who cares? Right? Just on the who actually cares? Like that is the... So if you start building from this, the impending heat death of the universe, let's start going back to who cares. Well, you care. Why do you care? Well, because I was blessed with consciousness, whatever this existence is. We don't need to crack that nut, right? We don't need to figure out what this thing is that's happening.
That's good because no one can anyway.
Exactly.
No one can explain it yet.
Right. And one of my best friends in Finland has this wonderful saying, bullshit, but I choose to believe it.
I love it.
Right. So it's like, I don't care what the...
Well, look, now now are we back to religion? Where are we at?
Exactly. But it's like whatever, so by its fruits, whatever delusion helps you live a better life. There was a point in my life where I cared quite a lot about other people's delusions.
But Alex, you can't use the word better. Now you're passing moral judgment.
I know. And so in the past, I used to quite aggressively. It's like, for me, 1 + 1 is 2. And if you tell me that you don't even see this as a math equation, there's something
because
superior.
Numbers are racist.
Or numbers are, just my interpretation of the symbol is, a different than yours. Like there's so many. So there's there is this. I have a slide on this for when we teach development work. And it gets a lot of people riled up in the most positive, intellectually rigorous way, where I see a lot of faces wake up first like, and then I get it, which is, why do we even do development work? Why do we do missionary work? Fundamentally, so
everyone listening, define development work.
So international development. So sustainable development goals, the UN, yada, yada. All of this that we do. Why do we even do it to begin with, right? So the drivers, the motivators of it, there are many slides, and I explore all of them with them, saying, here's one angle, here's another angle. And I end up at the self-interested angle. But before we get into the self-interested angle, there's one of these I said that really stops the conversation for a moment, which is, my values are better than yours slide. Right?
Yeah.
Isn't it? Like, this is how you treat women. There are entire organizations funded by millions and millions of dollars based on the fact that from Finland, Sweden, Denmark, US, a couple of other countries, we know how to deal with women, right? It's equality.
Better than you do.
Better than you do. And we're going to do everything to brainwash the psyops, the Joe Rogan conspiracy theories are all true.
Replace their government.
Replace your government, or at least the way your government works today. Let's replace it with a better way because our values are better. And I'm not a moral relativist. I agree. Sometimes we get it right. I would rather go back to the Taliban. Like, I would rather women speak and be public and educate themselves and all of that. It's clear as day.
Versus
to me.
what? Having children?
Versus being locked in behind curtains, not be able to speak.
Of course.
Right? So that to me is clear. But then I have to acknowledge, and I said that's where the conversation stops for a moment. It's like, look, get yourself off that high chair. This is not a universal truth. You are banking on your morals being better than someone else's, and be proud of it. Own that argument. I can own the argument. You have to make that argument. If your only argument is saying, well, women should be able to drive, and you can't say why, that makes sense. I would rather have you be able to say from first principles, cars are vehicles that anyone with, 2 hands and 2 legs can
So
drive.
are you saying morality is a thing?
I think so. Here's how we save ourselves from the bleak abyss of nothing mattering: is that we, I think, have the obligation to figure out our morality, and we have the opportunity to believe in it, and we have the ability to shape it. I think we do. And so if you don't do any of those things, what is existence? That's very nihilistic. And there are some
That's right.
well-known nihilists who couldn't scaffold their way out. They couldn't bootstrap their way, right? So I see it almost like, the computer crashing for someone like Schopenhauer or your Nietzsche. Like, they ding dong, Windows XP crashed, and they just can't boot up back again. Like in some of those and you look at their lives, like some of the darkest moments that they live through their lives, and they write this stuff in the attic. No one cares about you can see it where it comes from. Like I can see why you feel this idea, for example, of like, if someone asks you, where do you go after death? Just tell them, where were you before you were born? Wow. Right? The same darkness, right? So you can see the darkness. Like if you don't boot the system back up, if you don't build a system of morals, if you don't build a system of principles, if you don't build a system of who to care about or who cares with you. And I said, like, the easiest cheat code is, kids, like we referred to earlier, it's the easiest cheat code to start caring about life.
Yeah.
Right. This chain.
All you have to do is experience it.
Yeah.
And you know it's real.
Exactly. And not putting anyone down who hasn't done it or won't do it. That is a fine choice. But I said, being on vehemently against kids until light strikes and I get it. It is the easiest way to scaffold yourself, because that's the meaning. This is that's the chain. And I think I've mentioned this to you before, this idea of like 400 million years of evolution from the first, common ancestor, the unicellular one, that then spawns everything. And, we still owe much of our, genetic code and, or the way the genes work across all species that inherited everything. It's just miraculous stuff. And we are a part of that chain. So if nothing matters, at least let me tell you it doesn't need to matter to you. But isn't it cool as what? That we're on this rock that spins around itself, spins around the sun, hurls around the universe. And based on everything we've seen, this is the only place where this has come out. Podcast studios in New York haven't emerged, just in Alpha Centauri yet, based on what we're seeing.
And by the way, this podcast matters in the sea of a million podcasts.
I know, this is the one.
This conversation.
Like and subscribe, my friend. Right. Monster, please come in and get us a brand deal.
Seriously. But by the way, if I may insert, that's the choice. The choice is to give the wink with the statement. What I mean by that is, I chose this as a Shawnism because it's a way to speak to yourself when you're hung up and stopped by the obsession over the wrong things. Yeah. Because most of the things that we think matters just don't. And that's the point of this. That's why, I say nothing really matters with a wink because there are things that matter. Yeah. But sadly, it's not the things that most occupy us a lot of the times. Yeah. And I love what you're doing. You're modeling here something that I quite like. And it's one of my close friends who teaches with me, uses the Iron Man, argument, like trying to make the best argument of someone else's argument. Yeah. So nothing really matters. For sure, of course, it's so provocative that clearly, if we felt like that, we wouldn't be taught. We would be apoplectic. We would just quit. We'd be the slime mold on the floor. Why would we be wasting our energy speaking into these mics? So clearly, and perhaps the biggest decision is whether we end our lives or not, as some philosophers have pontificated over. Quit or keep going. That's right. And so clearly, we're keeping going. We're grinding at it, whether it's inertia or something else. So then this, what do we actually mean with nothing matters? I think the best argument in it that I think and when I say best has the most widest applicability and also the biggest impact if a person really absorbs the meaning of the Shawnism, is really just be really darn careful with what matters to you. Yeah. Right? Because there's a Francois from Amplitude, a wonderful conversation partner, incredibly provocative with this thinking. I was writing down notes, and I can't tell you how many times we cursed on just give fewer Fs. Just consistent. He was looking at the life that he and the mentorship he's given. I was like, all right, this is golden. You are so right. The things and the students, the first year associates at BCG, the things we care about, the things I indexed on, weren't eternal in the sense that another human in another time
would care about those. You need a
Yeah.
post-capitalistic society that has, this.
That's a good litmus test.
Isn't it?
But by the way,
Hmm.
back to your analogy, your offspring.
Yeah.
Would another human at another time care about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if it was not even their offspring, but
Yeah.
your offspring,
Yeah.
perhaps.
And it depends on what type of mission they are. So it's
Yeah.
like, this is a book I see writing when I'm 65. So I've started toying around with it. I have a Google Keep. This is my delusion, like my positive delusions. Is like I'll get to write about social engineering, not of the technical fraud stuff, but like this, like what type of a society to actually build. And at this time, I'm playing around with this idea of how cool would it be if all of us, or at least some of us, or more of us, were on board a mission of just humankind. The Rutger Bregman type of like positive history, positive future of it. The Noel Harari stuff. Like this, like what type of humans are we becoming? So again, one planet, one rock, potentially the only place where sentient life of this form, so capable of changing its own course, that as the Chinese dams this week, the news were that they're changing the rotation speed, right? So that all of the infrastructure you're building is changing how slow or quick the world actually rotates. So my God, like we're ants that are actually doing a lot of stuff to the forest we're inhabiting. And so how cool would it be if our mission was to just, as I said, trace back 400 million years? We are the shepherds. We carry this legacy from this. We're life. We have the baton. We have the Olympic torch, right? Hand it over. And if you don't hand it over, help someone who does. Make life, if you never have kids, absolutely fine. But don't make life shittier for people who do.
Yeah.
Right? There are a lot of CEOs, who make life shittier for people who are trying to pass on the torch.
Yeah.
And this is how you get 0.71 birth rates. Right? That is the grind. That won't replicate. Is like that model, just humans either cannot or will not, and they're opting out of the next generation, or helping someone else's next generation. So like that's the kind of what I'm toying around, is like how do we even narrate this? How do we make this into it's a mixture of Sagan's pale blue dot, and it's a mixture of the Toby Ord's existential crisis. It's all of this, but how do we bring this kind of mission focus to at least more of us that look like there's something cool about humanity as and its full diversity. We don't need to, again, museum curate it, right? Like this idea of like, let's freeze in ice how humanity looks like right now. No, but this thing. And also like we will evolve into another species most likely.
We have to let it evolve.
Yeah.
Like whether, to your point, it's our languages, it's our borders, our countries, our, ways of life. Our local towns. I live in St. George, Utah, which is such a cool place to live. It's next to all these beautiful national parks. The landscape's incredible. It hasn't heretofore grown to be the size of, let's say, a Salt Lake or a Denver, for lots of reasons, but partially because there are no giant corporations there. Lovesac is one of the biggest companies sort of located there. So people have to have some other form of income, you know what I mean, to locate there. What's my point? All of a sudden, post-COVID, it's exploding. It will become the next big stop between Las Vegas and Salt Lake. And there's a side of me that just really hates to see it. Because like right now I can ride my dirt bike out of my driveway to a trail and go. And I already know those trails, and even just a few years, my kids won't be able to ride on them because there will be suburban developments where those trails are. At the same time, who am I to hold it back? Right? Like in the sense that it is a better place, in my opinion, to live than many other places. And so it deserves to be experienced by others. And so I think that you bring up a great point. We need to embrace the evolution of all things, and not necessarily fight against it while preserving the few things that do matter.
That's right. So and being very careful with what matters, who we let matter.
Yeah.
And that is, I said, a conversation we're not having with ourselves, with our students, with our, with our kids. Too often we take it, we absorb it.
Well, and we sadly, it's amazing. I see it in my own life. As much as here I am talking about it, I am constantly on the daily spending too much time and energy on things that just do not matter. And I have to really fight against it. And so how then am I preaching this Shawnism? Nothing really matters. It comes back to most of the things that we engage in are the things that do not matter.
Mm.
And unless I'm reminding myself, like how much of our lives do you think we spend? You're a numbers guy.
Mm-hmm.
You're a professor guy.
Selectively.
How much time do you think we spend thinking and worrying about things that are really only relevant to other people's invisible opinions? That, like you were just saying, like when you started out at BCG, you're trying to live up to others' expectations. Like, how much of our lives do you think we spend essentially affected by others' invisible opinions?
Look, I'd love to say a lower number. I think the only fair number is all of it is seeped in it. So here's a thought.
All of our behavior.
Look, like I had a higher estimate of my ability to be unorthodox until I can't remember, was it Nassim Taleb or whose post I read on this idea of a reaction is conditioned on what you're reacting to.
Okay, explain that.
So, let's say you want to be atheist and you think that you are, showing the man, you're Luther himself. You're, sticking things on church doors.
Okay.
You think you're a free thinker. Aren't you not constrained by what are you nailing it to? Why are you like all of like this kind of gotcha? It was like, oh, you think you have free will, you bastard? No, you don't. You unorthodox market shapers.
You're
free
being
thinkers.
Controlled by the religion that you're actively rebelling against.
You are still stuck in the machine, my friend. You haven't red pilled yourself deep enough. Like you're still in the matrix.
All right.
And I was like, darn, yeah. Like, okay, like that applies to a lot of this. Truly, it does. That the social. So I'd like to think that the public opinion of doesn't matter, but of course it does. It's easy to say that when you're doing good in life, right? Like never listen to a handsome friend's advice on dating, right? Like you just they don't know. Like don't ask a fish how it swims.
Yeah.
Right. Don't and if you want to ruin your best friend's tennis match, ask them, how do you hold a racket again? Like make the implicit explicit. How does your muscle do the thing that it just does? So I think that the answer, like I think it's 100% is the real answer to this. That in the end, someone devilish, enough will show me that even if I show you that I am detached, they'll say, well, in the most immediate sense, yes, you're detached, but you're reacting to something that still couples you. You're still hooked. Like how to be an alien? Like who even wants that, right? And now, so the rant you triggered, I may need to explain because I quite often, in the past and less frequently now, I've held this intellectual standard, or like what is a good thought, with like this idea of like and I think this came from Breakfast of Champions or some like one of these wonderful books.
Yeah.
You wear like short essays, and the idea of like an alien. It was the alien zoo, yeah. And so I was like, okay, so imagine you have an alien on the moon with binoculars just looking at us, right? What would they say is an accurate description? Like if they were the zookeeper, how would they say Shawn and Alex? What are we engaging in?
Yeah.
Because there's a version we tell each other, right?
Yeah.
We enjoy the conversation deeply, that cherish it. Here's a good friend. I can't wait to see. But what is the behavior if we were just two dogs, sniffing each other's butt? What would a dog owner say? Or they're just greeting each other. They're organizing social structure. They're figuring out who's who. They're showing others in the social circle that they're in their own circle. Like, so you would typecast much of this behavior that I think is, agentic, that I think is driven by something mattering somewhere. And yet I think the Sapolsky, argument for free will not existing and an alien just typecasting it into places where like, I've taken a bit of a seat, and it's like, I can't give myself so much credit in that regard anymore. So that's but I'm working actively out of this rabbit hole. So let's see, like I'm trying to save myself from this view. And I said, like, it is on us to this earlier point. Nihilism of the giving up sense, in my view, is a waste of that one life. So
absolutely. There's got to be no question about that.
Yeah.
Like I think in some of these things, we can think deeply about them, and we can go around in intellectual or semantic circles about them. But this is where I go back to instinct, right? And this is, so again, nothing really matters with a wink. Clearly, there are things that matter. It's just often not the things that we're actually actively thinking about. And I think that this is where I would challenge everyone to pay more attention to their instincts. You know, you are a human on this earth.
Yeah.
In my worldview, you're a child of God.
Yeah.
You have instincts that, you know, we could argue are somehow purely genetic and have evolved over time. But I also believe they are imbued with godlike wisdom from the outset.
Yeah.
And if we pay attention to those instincts, wherever you want to believe they come from, we will often have better outcomes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think this world in all of its forms conspires against us to con us into giving over our agency to others' ends.
You're so right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's not that there is a matrix. I think there are 1,000 matrices that we are wading through. And others would have us pay our taxes, support their cause, support their political party, become a cog in their wheel, whatever that wheel is.
Even build their sofas.
Even build their sofas. And it's fine to be building someone's sofas. I couldn't, my company that gets to employ 2,000 people could not exist without the people who are willing to spend their life doing that. But I would prefer that they knew what they were doing. I would prefer that they knew that they were choosing to build sofas, to buy rice for their kids, or whatever it is, so that they can lead the kind of life they love versus accidentally waking up one day.
Yeah. Feeling conned into it.
That's my point.
Yeah.
And so like instinctually, I think it's really important that we pay attention to our instincts.
Yeah.
And that we listen to them and that we somehow find our way to purpose, even if it's as simple as, I'm going to feed my family.
Yeah.
That's at least a purpose that you can then be exercising your agency.
And I'll add another challenge to this. So we are social animals. And so I think we could make a lot of lives better by doing that ourselves, thinking from first principles. And you're seeing my midlife crisis evolve. Like,
I love it.
But this is it. Like, it's, you know, casting away, like finding a business daddy who says, validation, good, here's you go, 5 stars, you know, wonderful career. My goodness, it takes you a long while to cast that out. And still, like, there's something about it that appeals, because it is,
excuse me.
No, right. There is something about the social construct of, you know, our times, and whatever time that is, Aristotle's or our time, it does get it to us. Like, I can't be an alien, you know, looking at, I am seeped in it. I am reacting to
and
the
even
thing.
If you try to be,
I just dig yourself, like, you might be on the 3rd level of the same pile of shit. You're still reacting to the same pile of shit. And so on this, like, what are we losing sight of, I think, is the deep diversity of the human condition. And so, like you mentioned, like, who wants to do all the work we expect people to be passionate about all the time? Really, truly, all of it? Like, is there nothing? Right. So one of the, like, coming from Finland, you know, and coming to the US, one of the things that really strikes you very quickly is how the American system has magically placed every person who's in active employment working for something and someone that they're very passionate about.
Right, that matters.
Yeah. And not just matters, it's even better. They're passionate about it. It's like, it's the biggest miracle about the American system is truly that.
Yeah, like, who are you kidding?
Yeah, it's exactly. And coming from, I was like, look, go to work, get a check, go home, go to the forest, pick mushrooms is what I miss the most. Being able to go in the forest, pick mushrooms, be detached. My goodness, the first thing I do every fall we go in. But so, like, this idea of, like, okay, let's think about it. Why are you potentially saying this? Might it have something to do with the fact that it's at will employment? And if Shawn hears someone saying, I really, you know, hate this job, but I do it because I need to make a living. Yeah. That your prospect of that job that your living is contingent on suddenly, you know, continuing, dropped. I wonder which one it is. Like, magically, everyone's the great sorting hat of American academia sorted everyone into their favorite jobs, right? Or did something else happen? So I think apply nothing matters. to this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Apply that. So again, that it does free you. It's like, okay, sometimes I've advised some of my kids who come and ask for, if they're foolish enough, they'll ask for life advice. And at first I tell them, you don't replicate this mess. Like, I am figuring out like a way out of it. Made myself progressively unemployable. I'm the worst type of professor that all these universities date and no one hires, right? Like, there's many things that I am failing actively in all the things, but productively. Like, I am in free fall, but towards a goal I see, right?
Okay.
So like that is, but what the one thing I do tell them is that never become a company woman or a company man. And so I haven't sent anyone love sacks away, but I would still tell him, like, you can love Shawn, you can love the company, but sever yourself before someone else severances you.
Wow.
Right? And you go in, and if you have to put a mask, put a mask. Yes, sir. Give me another case. This is, I was built for investment banking. Yes, I was.
I was built to inspire people.
It
to
is
buy
my
better,
passion.
to buy less.
That's right. But make sure that when you meet someone like myself, when I wink at you twice, that you're ready to take the mask off and say, you're fooling them. You are. I know. Yes. Go exploit them, because they're exploiting you. Right? Like, just, all these, regardless of what day you open up Wall Street Journal, 2,000 layoffs, XYZ, right? And so, like, what matters is it the old relationship between you and who you were producing for, the guilds, of the Middle Ages, the production we did, like being the town blacksmith, right? Like, that was production we're built for. And when I say built for, like, that's, we have evolved in these circles. Obviously, blacksmithing didn't exist, but like being the guy who fletches arrows, that has existed for hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps. Like, I wish I knew when arrows were. So maybe I'm an idiot on this, maybe 20,000 years. But like this, whatever we were producing. So before our chat, I wanted to check, like, what are the earliest commercially produced items that we have archaeological records of. So I think pottery, we've discussed, like some of the amphoras, you still, like, we routinely pull them out of the Mediterranean and there's still wine in it. And so stuff is built to last by the Romans and Greeks. Like, you can still pour yourself a glass.
I love that.
Yeah. And it was the slingshot stones is one of these, like, in the ballpark of like the oldest commercially, like industrially produced, people sat to produce, mostly for warfare or hunting, right? Either or, like hunting humans
or imbibing.
Right, like there we go. But so, like, the slingshots, like, so that is what we have built our species around. We've co-evolved with that type of production, where the end of the production wasn't an abstract PowerPoint or a sofa sold to someone that you'll never meet sitting on them.
Yeah.
You produced for, I said, wine to imbibe. You produced services to serve.
For your neighbors.
Exactly. Or, items of war to guard or hunt with. And it was in the Dunbar's number 150. I'm not sure if that's exactly accurate, but within a smaller group. And so that, like, we find that level of service meaningful. So surprise, surprise, when religion and many of these other communal scaffoldings, again, Robert Putnam Bowling alone, as we dismantled them, when those things exist, life satisfaction goes up. And I don't think that is a big surprise, that when we go closer to what your earlier part was alluding to, like the factory settings, I don't think the natural is always good. Like, you don't have to say that whatever naturally occurs, cancer happens naturally and I want to eradicate it. But like, there's something to be said about being closer to factory settings of where in the ancestral environment we've evolved in, we've produced for people we saw and we cared about, right? Or something, we hated their guts, but they were still a cousin.
And what I like about it is you've characterized it as service.
Yeah.
So far in this discussion around nothing mattering, we've identified at least two things.
Yeah.
That we can at least agree do.
Yeah.
Family.
Yes.
Or even close relationships.
Yes.
And service.
Correct.
That's pretty interesting.
Isn't it?
And I agree. I think that, once again, from my point of view and where I come from, these are eternal truths. These are eternal truths. And I think given philosophers enough time and energy and conversation, many will arrive to these same...
Inevitable. And so for you can put it on in the big R book. I can put it in my aliens list on the moon, right? So they'll look at this as, what these two sentient meat sacks of 2025 version 2025 of Homo sapiens.
Sentient meat sacks.
Well, isn't that it, right?
I love it.
But what they're doing is building a relationship. They are enjoying relationships. And in this instance, it does nothing more as we're maybe chasing truth and mastery and enjoyment. So maybe that's what we're doing. But so the instinct to build relationships serves our genes in replication pretty well, doesn't it?
Yeah. So even this podcast, that's interesting. You're right. If you observe this from further away, it's not really about the words that we're saying.
Yeah.
It's about you and me sitting in a room together, clearly engaging each other.
Yeah.
And that's back to these close relationships.
Right. And if you want to start explaining some sexist, observations of life, two men doing this is building a warband. Right. So again, if you go into the ancestral environment, right, like it's more likely that, where in a community, two men came about, and if we're at spear chucking age and we found a way to connect, someone attacks your family. Well, I'm going to chuck a spear on them. You can call me from Utah. I'm driving from Brooklyn. Right. And I'm going to start saying, bad things about people who say bad things about you. So for an alien, like you could, and obviously that gets much more complicated, but like that's one thing an alien might say is like, how do you explain the fact that we've chosen to take time from the other pursuits from our families, the things we just said, the service, the family, that they matter, and we're wasting our time then? No, we're not, because we're doing something in service, building a relationship between two capable men who are then assumed to then be friends, and then yada yada, and all of these wonderful things come out of it. And so again, perhaps the danger is once you start quantifying things like an alien, you lose the soul, because like it doesn't feel like that. The categorization doesn't make it feel like it feels.
Yes. Well, and we do have feelings, and we do have instincts. And that's why I encourage people to, sometimes do less thinking and more listening.
Yeah.
More feeling.
Correct.
All right. When was the last time, so you're a Harvard professor, you're a NYU, instructor, Columbia. When was the last time you bombed something? Publicly or privately, and you realized on the back end of it, like nobody cared anyway. You know what I mean? Like it mattered to you in the moment, only to come to the realization that it actually didn't matter.
Yeah, that was yesterday. So and it really was.
Okay.
In a flagrant act of so for a Finn, it's hard to be self-centered in front of a public, but I did win favorite professor from the student body.
Rad.
In Harvard, and there was a three-way tie, so it's not as cool as you might think.
Awesome.
But I was like, that is the coolest thing
at Harvard.
Yeah, and wherever it is.
No,
like,
but Harvard's kind of a big deal.
Well, yes, for sure. But like to me, like it's like what really matters is it's the people I've been serving for years. I've been honing the craft for years, and I have been secretly very envious. Like Adam Grant, you look at the book sleeves, like chosen favorite professor. Like, oh shit. I was like, that's the thing. And geniuses, right? And then when it says chosen by the people you serve to have served them well, I was like, that is it. That's cool. The goal. Like, so what actually matters is like not the title, and it's adjunct professor, right? So it's like a much, much less fancy.
Fair.
And so, but what actually matters is the people you are spending time with in whatever positive engagement, look back at you and reflect on you and say, that's a good thing you're bringing into my life. I was like, that is I said, the greatest thanks you can give. And I told him this. So here's what I bombed was the speech.
Did you?
Oh, of course.
How so?
No, so I had a thing written on Word, right? And then as we're on, so I'm, looking at it, going through it, and I swiped the wrong way. I can't find it.
Oh no.
And so then what happened is something I actually try to teach when we talk about leadership and presentation.
Okay.
So I tell them, and if any of my students watch this, they'll email me and say,
like in other words, you don't hide it, you admit it.
Well, no. I'll tell you how it went. So I said for my students, they hear me harp about don't practice meaningful speeches word by word.
Okay.
That is the one thing I try to teach people is like you are not a memorization machine, and the only one. So nothing matters. No one else knows what the script was.
Yeah.
Except this idiot.
So don't apologize for things that they don't know.
Exactly. Don't even try the script. So what I teach instead is 5 points. I am grateful for. Imagine the picture. My TA, Kate, love her. The class wouldn't run without her. And if anyone thanks me for any of the class, 80% of it is because she keeps it running.
Okay.
Right. So like I just need a couple of pictures. The other picture in my mind that I need for this is the students. Why the hell do you wake up and do any of that? First of all, it's very selfish. Because I enjoy doing this. I get something out of this more than they pay me. I would do it for free.
A lot like raising children.
Isn't it? Yeah. And you get to do it to adults who pay for it, who are willing to transform and learn. Oh my God, like that is the greatest privilege. And that's what
reciprocate the conversation
at
and
best
teach you.
Teach you, yes, if you're willing to listen. Some professors and some teachers close their ears, but if you do open it up, my God, you learn much more. But so the bombing,
a lot like raising kids.
Again,
I learn a lot from my kids.
Correct. But so the bombing was, in the beginning of the speech, I said the wrong words. I stumbled. You know why? It didn't matter. People were applauding so hard. No one heard anything anyway, so I had to restart.
Isn't that funny?
So it was like it's this whole it was in a microcosm.
And by the way, what was it for dinner? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
like
there you go.
I mean,
indeed.
Their stomachs growling.
Correct.
They're trying to wonder
exactly
who they're meeting up with after.
Exactly.
And once you can put yourself, that's what this Shawnism is all about for anyone listening. If you can put yourself in the frame of mind that whatever the outcome, it doesn't really matter. You'll actually perform better. You can live better. You can feel more free, be more free. And ironically, probably, show up better.
Yeah.
It can be very difficult to do, but it's an active.
Yeah.
That's why I choose to use it as a Shawnism, even though it's not absolutely true. It has to come with a wink.
Yeah.
Is because these are things that I have to say out loud to myself, leveraging the age-old psycho-cybernetics approach. Because otherwise I slip into
forget it.
The mental havoc
Yeah.
of fumbling around for my speech in front of everyone at Harvard that can that can eradicate my ability to perform in the moment and make me feel terrible for the next few weeks as I reflect on that situation. But for the ability to convince myself, it doesn't matter anyway.
Exactly. And again, the invisible perceptions, the projected perceptions, your view. So you're doubly making yourself miserable. You're projecting on others
Meanwhile, when others do come up to you and probably told you did a great job and pat you on the back and it was the best speech I ever heard,
or passing. No, and it wasn't Jill, whose the actual speech teacher, spoke before me. So I was set up. I was set up.
And by the way, you'll reject those, sadly. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about humans. I'm talking about my daughter, who is convinced at 17 years old that she is all kinds of, things.
Yeah.
When in reality, man, she's amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean that not just as a father. I mean, objectively.
Yeah.
She's the most talented musician I know. She's beautiful. She's charismatic, and and somehow, in this terrible age that's called high school, and no matter what kind of compliments me or others bestow upon her, it's impossible to convince her otherwise.
Right.
So we have to find. I'm not trying to pick on my daughter. I'm saying that all of us have that person inside of us.
Yeah.
Every human. And by the way, remember that, because even people we put on a pedestal, people like me, I'm the CEO of a public company. We are all wrangling and wrestling with the most terrible insecurities, regrets, ruminations on yesterday and last week and last year. And only those of us who find a way to generate the self-talk necessary to overcome that can find any measure of success in this life.
You're right.
And that's what this Shawnism is about. Convince yourself that nothing really matters anyway, and you are free to live.
Yeah, indeed. And it reminds me of maximizing versus satisfying or satisfying. I think in the paper, it said this idea, and going to like social conditioning, school, high school, university, the pipeline. Be a good boy, be a good girl, get an A+, get a 10 out of 10. Here's the rubric, here's the answer, here's the question, here's the answer, here's the sanctioned answer, here's the preferred answer. Things get a bit more complicated as you go into university. Here's the approved tools, here's the XYZ. And this kind of the scaffolding of life sets us up on this path where, we are maximizing, like every time you grade someone, you can expect within 24 hours someone to email, could you please look into my grade?
Yeah.
I was like, first of all, I like one of the things I tell everyone when we have these phone calls, like, let me tell you, in 15 years, you will not remember what your grade was. in 15 minutes after this phone call, you'll feel like it's the most important thing, right? In 5 years, no one cares.
No one cares.
No one cares about this grade. You don't, you won't, but now you do. So you do. So we don't dismiss it because this version of you does care. So let's look into it. The grades don't come out of my personal bank account. I'm not withholding an A. Just probably 10 others kicked ass, right? But so I wonder though, like the dropout syndrome, right? Like this idea of like dropping out of Harvard, dropping out of Yale and doing something great. It's a badge of honor.
Yeah.
Because partially it says I was worthy and I reject it. So it's doubly worthy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I deem the worthy unworthy. So there's some level of elevation in that myth, but there's also truth into that quitting. I reject the rubric. Yeah. This is not life. This doesn't matter. Let me go to build Facebook, which matters. Let me go to the Himalayan mountains. That matters. Let me go raise my kids at age 22 because that matters. And so this is what I wish, like the maximizing route is never that, quite frankly. Because if you start maximizing, we usually start maximizing what society conditions us on. Wealth, social status, XYZ, right? And they're rarely the things that we would want to maximize at the end of our lives. But so if you start satisfying your life and satisfying your choices, so not getting the 10 out of 10, but getting a 7 out of 10, what is that extra? So let's say you're aimed for an A+ in my class, but then I tell you that instead, go get a B-. Use the extra grind you would have grinded on my exam to eat ice cream, make a friend, make a partner.
Is this real advice? Is this real advice you're giving?
When someone asks.
Keep going.
Yeah, but they have, so those students are rare who ask in advance. But so, because if you ask this after the class, it's too late. But so those who come in, this is the rant I give them, is like truly like aim for the satisfied grade.
I love that.
Not the maximized grade. And the same thing for careers.
By the way, hold on. In the context that you're operating, let me try this on you. If you want to go to Harvard, you've got to get the 4.0 in those previous years. Yeah. Because that's when it does matter.
It does.
Once you're at Harvard, I had a near 4.0 GPA in college. Do you know how many times I've been asked about that in my whole life? Yeah. You know the answer.
0.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe there was
unless I were to offer it, like some kind of obtuse.
Maybe there's a journalist who's like, Shawn, high school
no,
records, please.
Never. Nobody cares or cared. But and it did matter. Yeah. In high school because I got my college paid for. Yeah. By getting that 4.0.
Beautiful.
And so, I think we can be convinced by every podcast, by every clip on social media, that not only do we need to be eating more protein, but we gotta be sauna-ing, cold plunging, waking up, maximize. And I'll tell you and I'm a person I think who is perceived to have some amount of grit, some amount of drive, right? Some amount of ambition. I'm kind of the poster child for it. I'm the CEO of a public company. Yeah. I'm a founder, entrepreneur. And I try really hard to just be easier on myself. Yeah. And by the way, those around me. Yeah. And I try hard not to be a hypocrite. I try hard to, if I'm going to take a vacation, I make it a point to do it somewhat publicly so my people get the message it's okay for them to take a vacation. Yes. Because if you're working for someone who has you convinced that you can't take time off, they are not a good force in your life. Yeah. Yeah. Now, there's always a boundary to it, right? If I have the ambition to turn Lovesac into the world's most loved brand, which I do, I can't do nothing but take vacations, and I need my own, support crew to also be on point. But let's be easier on ourselves.
Yes, and you round out the point I was, getting to, but I didn't fully finish. It's like the first, easy on ourselves, and then second, perhaps even more importantly, easy on someone else.
I love that.
As early on as possible. Yes. Right? 'Cause like if it's you're right, like some of this is bullshit. Like I can't tell this to a kid in high school because it does matter. The thing that everyone knows won't matter quite soon is critical to you today, right? That is absolutely true. And the same thing goes for anyone who's in active employment with a boss they hate. It's like suffering through that is important. It does matter. It pays health insurance. It pays the mortgage. It's critical. But there is a counterfactual. There's a universe we haven't explored. There's a universe we're not stepping into. I mean, and if others around you close those doors by their behavior, just like you said, like the CEO never taking leave, unlimited PTO policy, don't take it.
Yeah, right.
I won't. I work hard. It's a work hard place, right? It's a rocket ship. So like, indeed, like sometimes I think it is even more important to model it for others and with grace, enable it in others. Like this kind of the satisfying, not the maximizing. Like even for the kids, like say Tiger Dad versus a B+ is good enough.
Yeah.
Because I know that you used those hours you would have used on grinding from B+ to an A. You used it on something that made you feel great.
Well, and to build on that, going back to my daughter, my wife is a concert pianist. You know, she went to school, she studied piano, she did the 3-4 hours a day it took to be competitive at that level.
Yeah.
It was amazing. When I met her, she was in that grind, and I got to see her graduate and do her senior recital. My daughter, I believe, has more raw talent than my wife or I have, musically or otherwise.
You'll hear of this at the dinner table.
No, my wife will openly admit that. And we're super satisfied and proud that that's the case.
Yeah.
But my wife has not pushed her down the track she went because, you know, I can speak for her. She shared this with me, you know, she regrets that 3-4 hours a day.
Yeah.
She regrets leaving family vacations to go find a church to use a piano in because they were in some remote location so she could get in her time to prepare. She wished she just had the vacation.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying you can't have ambition. You can't be an Olympic athlete, whatever. If that's your ambition, then you know the price you have to pay. But I think sometimes we get on a track, whatever that track is, and we con ourselves into a life that we didn't mean or frankly don't want to be living.
Yeah.
Now, does my wife regret knowing how to play the piano really well? No. I don't regret it either. I learned myself. But I just think that we have to align our ambitions to the outcome that we want. And if we don't, it will be aligned for us by those around us accidentally, and we'll wake up with some amount of regret.
Yeah. Agreed. You'll wake up in the matrix.
All right. You work with 1 million leaders. You interview, I think, 12 or more every Friday.
I try. Yeah. Most Fridays.
How does that even happen?
Yeah.
In your work with these leaders, what is the biggest myth that they believe about perception and performance?
I think the biggest myth we all believe in is that performance is accurately witnessed and observed by others, like the invisible. Right. So many of the things we spend a lot of time on ends up not mattering because it wasn't even observed. Good enough is good enough. Perfection isn't observed as often as we think. I think that's it. You know, like we push for perfection, but I don't think
good enough is good enough.
Good enough is good enough.
Coming from a Harvard, Columbia, NYU guy.
Yeah.
If more people adopted this mindset, what do you think would change about work culture?
Oh, we wouldn't talk about work-life balance. We talk about life spent working. I think we need to flip it. I'm not the first one to say it, right? But I think I just want to join the wave. And I am in my small ways, right? But that concept is just nuts. Like we spend one life on this planet and a sizable portion of it working. And so I think it would let us have more grace for the life part of it.
How can people in leadership positions build a culture where people are allowed to fail and perhaps can experience a better life outcome?
Modeling failure themselves, I think, leadership, right? Because with kids, you mentioned it a couple of times, you try telling a child to do something versus showing them how you act in that situation.
Yeah.
How do they pick up the curse words? Well, dad stubbed his,
stubbed his toe.
There you go, right? So it's the doing. It's the doing. That's the by far.
It's
like
interesting
modeling.
You say that. I'm playing the social media game because look, I'm building the brand. It's a tactic that must be part of the soup.
Yeah.
And my most viewed posts are always what I call my fail Fridays.
Yeah.
And I just, 90 seconds, I talk about some failure, and sometimes they're pretty funny.
Yeah.
And that's what people want to see.
Yeah.
And here I am, some kind of mini influencer or some, at least, I have some kind of little following.
Yeah.
This is good. Well, look,
Thank you.
I could go all day with you, Alex, and I look forward to working more with you.
Yes.
In the spirit of let me save you 25 years, if you were to give one piece of advice to anyone listening out there, to help avoid some of the same midlife crisis you find yourself in, or, you speak with all these leaders, what's just one piece of advice that might shave a chunk off someone's 25-year journey?
Think of corporate life as a series of masks you wear, that you put on, that you can take off, that don't leave indelible marks on yourself. Find the self under the masks as early as possible, and know that you are performing with those masks on, indeed, like in service of someone else. I think that's the people I look up to the most. They knew who's under the mask. And I don't want to say like, be yourself. That's the worst advice. Right? Some of us are assholes. Right? We have to pretend to be social. We have to tame ourselves. Don't be yourself. It's not
a good life strategy to just be yourself all the time.
But know who that is, and then be true to it.
Ooh, I like that.
I think that would have saved me a lot of time.
Back to self-awareness.
Yes.
But not always unfiltered self-expression.
No, for sure. No. It's the dumbest advice. Be yourself. Like, no, some of us are monsters. Be social, be nice, but know who you are.
Well, there you go. Advice to all you Lovesac employees out there, right? We're grateful that you put on the mask. Yes. We're grateful that you give a piece of your life. That's how I put it.
Yeah.
And I mean this, and I say this a lot actually when I visit even stores. I say, look, because I have people that have been both at the corporate level, but also in stores. Imagine that. Every day for a decade or more in the same mall.
Wow.
In the same 800 square feet in some cases.
Yeah.
And I look them in the eye and say, look, whether Lovesac is a stepping stone in your career or whether you're here for a decade or two or forever, I am grateful for the piece of your life that you are spending here. And by the way, I mean it because it sucked my entire adult life in.
Yeah.
I didn't mean for that to happen, but I wake up pushing 50.
Yeah.
Realizing that, I could have made other choices.
Yes.
But here I am. And I don't regret it. In fact, it's actually freed me to realize, well, geez, 25 years didn't even matter. Like it was painful at times and fun and exciting at times. But now that I realize a quarter of a century can go by like that.
Yes.
Why not do another quarter?
Correct.
And now I'm free, bro.
Yes.
Now I'm free to maybe build a Nike, an Apple, a Disney. Not even because it matters. To your point, Walt's gone. Didn't think about him. I've been talking about Disney all day.
Yeah.
Didn't think about Walt until I threw his name out,
Yeah.
Steve Jobs is gone. Phil Knight's moved on. So it's not that even that matters. It's just an exciting endeavor for me to pursue.
Yes.
I find it really cool to see if I can't do it.
Yes.
And I need others to do it with me, admittedly. So if they got to put on a mask to satisfy their boss's boss so they can get through their next, corporate review and keep their job and feed their kids and do whatever actually motivates them, I'm grateful to them for doing it.
Thank you for the service.
Thank you for the service. Nothing really matters, but we did suss out family, service, close relationships, people that we collide with, even day to day, even briefly, matter even more than couches, sacks, money, wealth, cars, stuff. I love it.
Yes.
Wow. Well, you can find Alex. He's spinning up his own Curiosity podcast, which you definitely need to check out. Check out his website, Alexander Puutio, Puutio, Alexander with an E at the end, Puutio.com. And when you're there, be sure to download a free copy of his book, The First 300, because it is incredible. Alex is incredible. We're going to be doing more together. You just wait. Stay tuned. 2, the professor with multiple PhDs. What? The mind-blowing member of Mensa. Yeah, you just had an hour with a genius. the global do-gooder himself, Mr. Alex Puutio. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll never live up to any of those accolades. Thank you, Shawn, for setting it up.
And remember, we can be our own worst critics and enemies. We can fall into the pattern of thinking that the spotlight is on us at all times, but it is not. It never will be. No one really cares what you're up to. So forget obsessing over what you think people are thinking, because nothing really matters. It just might save you a chunk off your own 25-year journey.
Once a year to take my friends away. It should not be the budget for your bike across America.
TikTok has become an aggregator for some of the dumbest human actions.
When I won that million, I was $2 million in debt, barely hanging on.